Okay, I'd like to call to order the City of Menasha Board of Public Works. Clerk Galeazzi, could you please take attendance? Thank you.
Alderman Keehan. Alderman Zielinski. Alderman Benner. Alderman Nichols. Alderman Krautkramer.
Here.
Alderman Langdon. Aldermans Taylor and Rollins Jump have been excused.
First order of business tonight is to approve the minutes from June 1st, 2015. Do I have a motion to approve? Alderman Langdon?
Thank you, Chairperson Kramer. I will make a motion to approve the June 1st minutes of the Board of Public Works 2015.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have two action items to discuss this evening. The first one is a payment to Yankee General Contractors, Gilbert Riverfront Trail, contract number 2014-03 in the amount of $89,331.58. This is payment number 2. Director Radke, do you have any information for us?
Yes, this payment is for the contract that is the on-land portion of the trail project. This is not for the trestle portion of the project. And they've made a lot of progress since the last payment request. If you go out on site and see that they've put in a lot of trail and done a lot of work around the duck pond, and this payment reflects that additional work that they have done, and we recommend approval at this time.
Do we have a motion to approve payment to Yankee General Contractors? Oh, sorry. Oh, Alderman Nichols, sorry.
You turned your mic off, Will. I'd like to move that we forward to the council the payment to Yankee General Contractors for the Gilbert Riverfront Trail, contract number 2014-3 in the amount of $89,331.58.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Alderman Zielinski?
Thank you. Mark, is there any breakdown of where these monies are being allocated to what project? Do you have any kind of breakdown? Because I mentioned that last time about how much we allocated for the pond area.
No, I do not have that breakdown on here. And because it involves several items and not all of that item, it would only be a portion of some of these items. I mean, some of it's excavation, some of it is provision of topsoil and mulch that all involve the pond.
So are we following on target here with what we allocated overall?
Yes, we are.
There were some concerns about this pond, how much this was actually going to cost. And
Right. No, as of our last analysis and accounting, yes, we are within that amount. And again, I'll reiterate on the other portion of this project, which is a different contract. We did have to suspend operations because of the issues we had with the piling, and I think we're getting close to a resolution on that. We'll be meeting again this week and hope to have some further information and a recommendation on going forward, but it's looking better than maybe what I had previously indicated, so we're hopeful with that. But there has been a suspension. I want you to be aware of that, and we hope that we'll get that project up and running again. We're still soon, but we are awaiting some further engineering analysis that is being done, not at city cost, and when we get that, I think we'll be ready to move forward with that also.
okay, thank you. Were there any change orders on the pond? Because I'm on the park department committee, and they were talking about changing some retaining walls and stuff. And were you aware of that with city?
Yes,
staff?
we did make some changes. I'm not aware of the specifics, but I know we did reinforce the retaining wall around on the west end of the pond, if that's what you're referring to. That was done with force account work, yes, our own crews.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Alderman Langdon?
Thank you, Chair Kramer. Mark, just a question on the item number 13, the park shelter installation for $4,000. What is that like? Is that just like cover over a couple of frames, or what does it look like? Or do you have any of that? I mean, with a bench in there? Or?
There are benches nearby. It's a covered shelter. I don't know if there's a seat wall on there. I'm not certain. Brian would know better than, I guess, Greg or I, but
Yeah, kinda
Greg
like-
is wondering if they might be similar to the shelters out on the Trestle Trail, possibly.
Oh, that'd be cool. Okay. And the engineering on the
Trestle.
trestle, I mean, that would still get done hopefully this year?
We're hopeful, yes. I
And
don't
then
see
that
why
would
it
be,
can't be.
that would be the completion of the trail then,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah, they're getting
They're
close
getting
to
really
being.
far, yeah.
Right, on the rest of the project.
Yeah, it looks really nice. Okay, thanks.
Right.
Any other discussion? Mayor?
I can answer Mark's questions a little bit. The shelter is sized to fit a picnic table, so it's a fairly small shelter. They were setting it today. They were starting to put it up. I can't quite see it from my window, so I'm not sure how far they got, but you can walk out there and take a look at it if you're interested. The trail is all finished up to the trestle. You can walk on the trail. It's still blocked, but you could walk up there during non-work hours. I don't know if they'd want you out there when they're working, but.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Put on a hard hat.
Walk a trail.
Any more discussion? I do believe we have a motion and a second, so let's take a roll call vote, please.
Motion carried on roll call 6-0.
The next action item that we have is the 2015 Quarter One Storm Water Report. Director Radke, could we summarize this for us a little bit?
Well, I'll take care of the part that involves the engineering and the operations, and I'll turn the rest over to Peggy for the financial side of things. Very briefly, you'll see in my cover memo that our stormwater utility is there to provide revenue for the operation of our storm sewer system, stormwater system, and it's a means of recovering and generating that revenue that it takes to operate the system. And one of the reasons we went the utility route is because then we can involve all properties. Some of our most highly runoff properties are tax exempt properties. So that was the premise back in 2008 when we initiated the stormwater utility, is that we would include those properties then in charging for these costs to manage and to take care of these stormwater discharges and runoff. A big portion of our next phase will involve the Lower Fox River TMDL, Total Maximum Daily Load. That is a part of our current MS4 permit that was issued by the DNR last year. And they're going to take a look at what our waste load allocation is and what kind of reduction in phosphorus and total suspended solids are necessary in order to meet that allocation amount. And it's going to involve what we anticipate to be quite a bit more additional work, more best management practices, which amount to some operational things as more efficiently street sweeping, and addition of more ponds, biofilters, that type of thing. But at this point, we don't know because we are currently completing a planning study that will give us that information that we need to go forward with. And it's anticipated that that study will be completed by the end of this year. However, before we talk about specifics in any rate adjustments, we will have our engineering consultant here to present to the council where we're at now and where we will be heading, although there won't be any real specifics, project specifics. I think he'll give us a good idea of where the city of Menasha is in relation to what our required allocation level is and what it'll take to get there. So that's something to look forward to. In the next meeting or two, we will have that person here to present to the council or to the Board of Public Works that report in a not a complete format or report that is complete yet, but it'll at least give us a status of where we're at. So I did want to inform the board of that, and then the rest is the report that Peggy had put together, and she can either go through it or take questions from the board.
Can I ask a question, please?
Alderman Benner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, before we go on to Peggy with the financials, one of the things I've always been concerned with these stormwater ponds is in the future sometime, I'm sure we're going to have to be doing some dredging in these ponds, and we're going to have some waste disposal associated with that as we look at these prices. And I'm not sure how far down the road that will be. Do you have any thoughts, or have we been giving consideration to that or talking to our consultants about what that's going to look like at this point?
I have not discussed that with our consultant, but there is a specific section of the code that deals with the management of stormwater pond sediment, and so it's something that we will have to deal with, and it's a matter of disposal and where you can dispose and that type of thing, and when you have to dispose of that sediment.
Yeah, because the things that we had talked about are kind of immediate future type things that we have to do, and since we started the stormwater utility and we accepted some ponds that were given to us and things like that, that's always been something that's sat in the back of my mind, is how we're going to manage that. And I'm sure that if those waste products right now aren't considered to be hazardous waste, that they probably will be by the time we have to do that. And I was just wondering, I was curious, and if not, again, if our consultants might be able to talk about that when they come in
Sure.
in a couple of weeks.
I'll talk to him
kind of
and
address
ask that he
a little
include
bit.
that in his presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Director Stino, sorry, Alderman Zelinski,
Thank
another
you.
question.
Mark, short of retention ponds, phosphorus is becoming the big problem. How do we deal with that?
A lot of dealing with phosphorus is just by dealing with the solids, because by removing the solids, you're removing a certain percentage of phosphorus that is in those solids. They've found that it's about like for a 20% removal of suspended solids, you'll likely achieve a 15% removal in phosphorus. So with the TMDL, we're looking at a 65.2% additional removal of suspended solids. And I think with that, they're thinking that the phosphorus that is removed by removing the suspended solids, that threshold will be met.
Okay.
The 30% removal of phosphorus, but that's correct. Now, the wastewater element of that, because Nina Menasha Sewage Treatment Plant is also under a permit that has to deal with phosphorus. That is separate from what I'm talking about, and they have very specific phosphorus removal requirements, and I forget where the treatment plants are. We aren't really involved in that, but it will impact us through their rates. But they were not the highest in the area, but on the higher end of what they needed to do in terms of removal of phosphorus.
So is street sweeping a major component before it becomes a suspended solid?
It is a component, and it is,
And how do we keep track of what we accumulate through street sweeping?
well, we keep track through mileage, and frequency of street sweeping. It's something that has to be reported on every year as part of our annual report to the DNR.
Is there a
So we-
standard setup for street sweeping, or?
There is. It's in the model. There's an amount that you can claim as a credit.
And do we register the tonnage that we pick up, or?
We
is there any
do.
way of doing that?
Yeah, we dispose of it at the landfill. So we can keep track of that, although, you know, we don't take the street sweeper to the landfill, so we temporarily store it at the Public Works facility and then haul it.
And this is probably the most efficient way of removing the
Well,
waste before it becomes a suspended solid.
Exactly. It leads to Alderman Benner's question. If you can intercept these materials and pollutants upstream from the stormwater management pond, so much the better. Then you have more life out of that pond before you need to handle the particulates and the sediment.
Is there anybody tracking how we're doing on that?
There is and again, that's part of the annual report. We have to go out and take measurements at each pond and determine what level we're at.
Every pond?
Every stormwater pond.
Yeah, I was talking about the streets and the amount that we were removing, because I just noticed in my neighborhood, we didn't get to sweeping streets until really late in spring. And there were residents cleaning their curbs because there was still leaves left over from last year. And how do we?
Well, they shouldn't have been. I mean, we try to get out as soon as we can after the snow, and that's when we operate 2 shifts to try to get a lot of that material before it does go down the drain, because you do have a lot of leftover remnant material from the winter season.
Is there another street sweeper being purchased soon, or?
I think next year you'll probably see that in the budget.
Okay.
Again, it's depending on, we wanted to wait and get the results of this study to determine what the most cost-effective manner is to achieve our regulation number.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Langdon?
Thank you, Chair. Mark, on the street sweeper, how do they do that? Do they go by districts?
It's
There's set up for like
2 levels of, we have an area that's in the central part of the city that we sweep weekly. That's our objective, and schedule is on a weekly basis. The rest of the city is once per month in your residential neighborhoods such as yours, so there should be, I can't tell you what streets are done when, but the frequency is to sweep once per month.
Once per month on each street? Okay.
Yes,
Then that starts from as soon as you can until
as soon as you
as
can.
long as we can?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Director Steno?
Okay, if you look at page 1, it's basically called Statement of Net Assets. That's our balance sheet. What we want to look at is a couple things. The first thing is our cash levels over the last couple of years. And as I'm looking at these statements, I'm looking at indicators to see if we're okay as far as rates go, if we need to increase, et cetera. When we look at cash, we have to look at our asset, cash and investment. We also have to look at our accounts receivable and accounts payable. So the net effect of that at the end of 2013, we had cash of about $872,000. At the end of 2014, we're looking at cash at about $648,000. So that means that that's one indicator to me that our stormwater utility is not performing the way it should be. When I look down at the bottom at total net assets, of course we bring on new assets, et cetera, with some of our underground infrastructure and equipment. We are looking at 2012, 25,000 less in net assets from the year before. 2013, 105,000 less. 2014, 131,000 less. Those are indicators that our operations are not doing well. If you turn it to page 2, you'll see the income statement, and that's just going to reiterate what you saw on the first page. If you look at our operating loss or income in the middle of the page, you'll see 2013, 106,000 short of meeting expenditures, and in 2014, revenues are 133,000 short of meeting revenues. those are really strong indicators that say our stormwater utility is not sustainable at this time. We've been talking about this a little bit through the budget processes. This is the second one that 2015 that I've been through. And I think I mentioned last year when we were going through the workshops, we have two choices. We can either stop charging things to the stormwater utility or increase our rates. If we stop charging things to the stormwater utility, there's going to be a question on whether we can meet the requirements that Mark was just speaking about. So what I did, if you look at pages 3, 4, and 5, these are some things. I've got a lot of stormwater utility in my background. I actually set one up in Waukesha and certainly maintained a very large one in Oshkosh. These are some of the things that I think are important for the council to, or the Board of Public Works and the council to talk about as we go through looking at a rate case. We're in the middle of putting the case together. I don't have all the specifics until we know how much we need for some of those bigger projects. It would be short-sighted to put that together, but I think in the next couple weeks we're going to be able, that's going to be coming a little bit clearer. But what we know already is that our expenses are higher than our revenues, and that's a very large problem. And in a couple of years, at the rate we're going to run out of cash as well. So I guess between now and the 20th of July or so, which would be 2 meetings from now, if everyone could maybe just look at some of these question and answers, maybe come up with some more questions. I think it's important to have everybody on the same page as far as what's getting charged to the utility and the reasons for that. And then on page 6, you see we have some of our comparables in the area and size comparables. And then page 7, starting at page 7, I think it's 7, 8, and 9, detail out what exactly is being charged by every department. And I think it's time for us to have that detailed discussion because I can't see any other outcome in this than a recommendation of a rate increase in the next couple months.
Okay, any questions, discussion? Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peggy, people have always been critical about the different departments within the city that end up charging the stormwater fund for their department. Could you just kind of talk a little bit, just briefly, about why those different departments are attached to the stormwater utility? I was here when this was at the tail end of this being created and then implemented, and there was some strong rationale why these are here, and I was just wondering if you could comment on some of
Sure.
that for us. Thank you.
Basically, the stormwater is a utility fund. And in a utility fund or an enterprise fund, what you try to do is you try to gather all the costs that are attributable to those services and charge it out to basically the parties that benefit from the services. That's the idea. When things are charged on the tax bill, you don't necessarily get all the users because of the nonprofits. Now, we're one of those, and that's the way it works, but the goal of an enterprise fund, and that's that second question on page 3, it's really important. What we're trying to do is we're trying to charge the cost of the project, the programs, to everyone who benefits. So I could just take, for example, finance. Does my time need to be charged there? Could it just be charged to general fund? It could, but it wouldn't be fair to the taxpayers that all of the ratepayers aren't paying for at least some of the time that I'm doing fill in the blank. We do AP and AR every week. We do the budgeting, the rate monitoring, these reports, year-end reporting. Part of the audit comes from this enterprise fund accounting review. So it's really important that we do everything, and I guess that's why I wanted to show you all the details of which departments we're charging, because anybody should be able to show you exactly why any of these charges are included in the utility, because it's a benefit to the utility ratepayers by having those charges in there. If it wasn't, we shouldn't be doing it.
Any other questions or comments? Alderman Zelinski?
Thank you. Peggy, is there any way from the inception of when we created this, how each one of these departments increased or decreased? Like street construction, if we do more street construction, that could blow this budget through the roof.
Correct, and that's actually one of the issues we're dealing with right now, because in the 2015 budget, we do have a fair amount of capital costs. Now, in the past, in these last few years, because we had some cash stored up from when the utility was brand new, we were able to fund some of those capital projects out of cash. That's not necessarily going to be the case going forward. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to look at borrowing. Now, because we're not borrowing on the public market right now, that leaves basically a state trust fund loan, which is GO borrowing. So that'll be one of the decisions that the council's going to have to make, is how are those capital items going to be paid for? It doesn't necessarily make sense to pay for all of those out of your back pocket. I mean, if you can, that would be great, kind of like in the scenario of a homeowner. If you can pay for your house payment and pay for your house and your car without taking a loan, that's great, but that's really not reality. The amount of expenses that have been charged each year, you can see on the expense line on page 2. It's the second section from the top, operating expenses. You can see the totals of what's been charged. And you can see in 2009, smaller expenses, 790,000 up to 958, down to 771, up to 1,057,000. And all of the departments are parts of that.
You know, but like some kind of diagram or graph, how is this affecting the tax rate? Because we're transferring a lot of these duties that were in the general fund to this utility, and I haven't seen the tax rate go down in the city of Menasha substantially from the amount that we're using in this utility. And that's the concern this is the concern that the constituents have. Hey, if we're creating this and we're getting more people to pay into it, how come it's not directly affecting our tax rate in the city of Menasha? And that's my biggest problem with increasing this rate and bringing more stuff into this, but it's not affecting the tax rate in the city of Menasha. 'Cause these are big things, street reconstruction. And look at engineering, and all this stuff was in the general fund at some point.
Well, I think there's a few answers to that question. First of all, point well taken. You can see that the expenses have been going up over time. Has it been affecting the taxes? Unfortunately, the answer to that is yes. They would have gone up higher had these costs still been in there. So I get it that it's not reducing, but the reality is it would have been higher had these things not been separated. The next thing is, I'm pretty sure, I don't have a lot of history from 2009, 10, and 11, but I started looking at it pretty closely in 12. I think the capital construction has increased. Mark, maybe you can comment on that, but I think the earlier years, there wasn't a whole lot of capital construction, and it has been getting more and more. We can certainly show you some more details on that as we, walk through the rate analysis, but
'Cause we're always comparing to other communities on this fund and our tax rate. And I would like to see, I don't know if you can find out what they're using all their stormwater fees for.
Well, from community to community, you're not going to see anything different as far as what they're using. An enterprise fund is an enterprise fund no matter which community you're in. So you can pretty much, anybody who's treating it in the true accounting sense of an enterprise fund should be charging all of the same things we're charging there. And the comparables on the stormwater rates are on page 6. But, the tax is a bigger, it would be almost impossible for me to compare everyone's tax rate along with your utility rates and know, specifically what's where. But the whole idea of an enterprise fund is so that all of the costs attributed to the utility would be charged there. So any communities that I've worked with or in, certainly that's been the way it's been done. Now, could there be some who want to pick up some of their capital costs on the taxes? There could. I just wouldn't have a mechanism to find that out for you.
Is there a mechanism to find out the rates collected? You say our rate is a little bit lower, but on some houses or some duplexes, they're charged double versus some other cities that are only charging them 1. So you say our rate is lower, but we might be collecting twice as many from one segment of the population.
Yeah, there's a number of different formulas out there as far as, is it a duplex 2? I've seen that in the past. I think that's the way it is here. I've seen a duplex as 1.5. I've seen a triplex as 3. It just depends, when you set your rates up and what the mechanism is for the entire community. That's what it ends up being. Usually that's not changed midstream. I'm not saying it can't be. I'm just saying usually once that's set up, that's basically the structure under which the utility operates.
Yeah, I was here when it started, and I didn't agree with it then. And I am privy to other utility bills throughout the valley and stuff, and they're rating houses by the size, not by one unit.
Usually residentials aren't done by the size. That's not common at all. Usually commercials, when you set up a stormwater utility, those are the ones that are done by size measurements. Residentials, usually up to a 3-family, those are done by some mechanism like we were just talking about.
Yeah,
0.5, 1, 0.5, 2, et cetera.
Yes.
Usually you're not going to see a residential that's done by a measurement. It's just, there would be, especially a community of any size, they're not going to be able to ever measure all of their properties. So it's usually, in West Dallas, for example, we had a city that went from a super, super small lot up to a big one. So we had 3 different tiers, a small, medium, and a large. Oshkosh happens to be the same way. It just, again, it's the mechanism under which the utility is established is usually how the structure works. But residentials usually aren't by size.
Could you bring that to us in the next meeting?
You want to just see how some other
Yeah,
communities
how-
do that?
How they're billing them out?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Langdon?
Thank you, Chair. Mark, I was just wondering, reading on page 4, why is the rate increase required in the storm water utility? And you mentioned street constructions before. What if we cut street constructions back? Would that do anything? I know I heard, now I don't know if this is true, but I heard that Neenah, when they do theirs, and this is why their streets maybe aren't as good, but they do theirs to go 60 years, where we're doing ours to go 30 years. Now, I don't know if that's true over there, it's just what I heard. But if we cut that back at all, would that do anything?
Well, first of all, the portion of the street project that gets funded by the stormwater utility is just the curb and gutter. We're not talking about the entire street.
Oh,
And any associated storm sewer work, of course, would be charged to stormwater utility. If you look at our ratings have not gone up in terms of the actual condition rating of the street. They've been trending down because we had a period where we were not spending as much money and I think not adequately funding the streets in order to maintain a service level that the city has been used to. Could we cut back on that? We could, but then we'd be looking at streets that would be more like the street we talked about today, Racine Street. That's the kind of condition that you'll get because you just don't have the money to maintain and then to recondition, rehabilitate, or reconstruct, depending on what is necessary for that street. You can make a street last 60 years, but the cost up front is all taken into consideration, and then you'd be much more expensive and costly in order to do that. We don't do it for every project, but we do still compare costs of various pavement structures and pavement sections, both for concrete and asphalt. And we do strive for a, approximate 30-year life. I'd say a little bit higher on concrete streets. And from what I look at the streets that we are now reconstructing, we're at about that level. And to cut back on that would just make it that much less of a, I think, service to the residents and to the users.
And we were just talking about, well, can we all put our heads together here to try to So that was just one of my questions, so, okay, thank
And
you.
again, by doing this, at least we're getting everyone who contributes to and benefits from this stormwater utility as a contributing supporter of that utility. And all the tax exempt properties who are some of the biggest generators because of the roof areas, the parking lots, and all of the impervious surface that they have on their properties is relatively higher than what the non-exempt properties are.
Alderman Zelinski?
Thank you. On the street construction, can we get the total number on there? Because I'm sure there's engineering involved in that. Because you could, and storm sewers and drains and reconstruction. You make the street construction look small, but there's other segments of this that are contributing to that reconstruction, aren't there?
Okay, what section are you referring to? On
Well,
the-
1003, street construction is 448,000.
Okay.
But engineering must be contributing to street reconstruction also.
No, the engineering would be above in 1002.
Yes. But when we're doing street reconstruction, the engineering's involved in that, right?
Correct.
So we're
Yes.
just separating them here, but it's not the true
Well,
cost of
that's-
street reconstruction.
That's how we do our accounting and budgeting, is by those accounts, and that's where that time is allotted. I could make an estimate. We don't have a, I'm trying to think. Yeah, we don't have anything that would itemize our engineering to the point where we're doing storm sewer work or street work that involves
When you're doing
only
the
curb
major-
and
When
gutter.
you're doing the major surveying of a street,
But only
That's
the
the
portion
engineering.
that is curb and gutter would get charged to stormwater utility, and that we don't break out. When we're inspecting, when we're surveying, when we're staking, when we're designing the street as a whole. We don't break out what it costs for designing the curb and gutter. So that's what makes it difficult. It'd only be an estimate.
yeah, but it's hard for me to tell where the time is being used for engineering.
Well, we've already estimated that
There's a lot of
25 to
things.
30%, 20, somewhere in that area, we feel is an accurate reflection of the amount of time expended on stormwater activities.
But when we say we're gonna fix a street, we gotta know how much engineering dollars are going into that street. Shouldn't we know that?
I would roughly say that it's going to be about 10% of the project cost, and then whatever percentage of that project cost is curb and gutter, we would be 10% of that.
Yeah, because getting back to again, we're comparing one community to another, and some of them use it for special assessment. I don't know where their special assessment comes in for street reconstruction. I'm sure engineering's in there.
It is.
Storm sewers and drains are in there.
That's all in there, and that is, when we do a capital project, that's how it's charged out, is all of our storm sewer project and contract items are accounted for as such, and when it's sent down to finance, that's where it gets charged to.
Not that I'm endorsing special assessment, but how do we get a grip on this? Because I heard a lot of communities coming up against it, or a lot of the residents, but I haven't seen too many changing. Because their stormwater fees would go through the roof, or taxes, vice versa.
Well, again, I mean, we're up against regulations and standards and performance standards that have been legislated, and that's what we have to meet. And now with the TMDL, they're only going to be that much more difficult to reach without finding money to do that. Hopefully a lot of your questions, I mean, I can answer the questions that are specific to our department and in the expenditure and revenue side. I think when we have our engineering consultant here, probably at the July 20th meeting, or whatever that Monday is, I'll ask him to address those types of things.
So he could have some, he won't have the totals, but what street reconstruction really cost, broke down to one number, not engineering all the other. I don't know where these are going, actually. You can say engineering, but there's a lot of things that go into engineering, and which ones for street reconstruction, that we're actually coming up with a number for street reconstruction.
It's, all I can do is give you my best estimate. A lot of our engineering goes into carrying out and administering our MS4 permit requirements. We've got illicit discharge, we have erosion control, we have post-construction stormwater management, we have construction stormwater management, and
I'm sure that time can be tracked.
there's mapping that has to be done. But we don't track it that way. Because that all takes some time and then what do you have? All these different categories, and let's see, what did I do? I spent, 30 minutes in this or 15 minutes in that. I don't know that would be time wisely spent, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, again, it goes back to what Alderman Langdon was asking. Are we keeping up on some streets? It depends which residents you talk to if we're keeping up on the streets.
Yeah.
Some are very happy, some are irate.
Well, and fortunately, we have now started to have a capital improvement program, a 5-year program, that we can talk about some of these things, because I think that is very important.
Some streets are very efficient to put in, and some are very, very costly.
Some because maybe you wait too long, we wait too long, and then it becomes a costly project.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions?
One more thing.
Alderman Lane?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Peggy Stino. Boy, I tell you, she's been great for us, for this city, since we hired her, and for her knowledge and information and her expertise in these numbers and letting us know, where we're at and what we should do in that. So thank you for all you do. I just want to say that.
Thank you very much, Alderman Langdon. Any other questions? Seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Broadcasts of the City of Menasha Administration Committee, Board of Public Works, and Common Council meetings are produced by University Studios of the University of Wisconsin-Fox Valley. Menasha residents and interested parties can obtain information about these meetings and meeting agendas from the city website, www.cityofmenasha-wi.gov. Expression of opinions regarding City of Menasha issues or about these broadcasts can be made by contacting the Mayor's Office, 920-967-5117. Contacting their city alderman. Contact information appears on the website. Completing the electronic feedback form on the website. All public portions of the meetings are recorded in entirety and are not edited for playback.